Hello and welcome to our fifth and penultimate developer live stream during the Summer Steam Games Festival. We'll be showing off Breakpoint, our retro arcade tribute to twin stick arcade games. My name is Nick, half of the studio making the game. With me is Ed, the other half of the studio.
Hello.
And we are joined by Steven Garcia, freelance sound designer and music composer. Steven, how are you doing this evening?
Hello. I'm doing pretty well. Enjoying the beautiful weather up in the Pacific Northwest.
Nice. Yeah, in as far as we can enjoy it indoors and through our windows and through patio
Took a walk earlier
openings.
today. Still allowed.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's healthy and good. It's necessary to be outside a little bit, get a little bit of that vitamin D, right?
Absolutely. I've got a little.
Have you had a chance? Yeah, to go outside a little bit more often to make a habit of it, Steven?
Yeah. Well, I've gotten into woodworking over quarantine, actually.
Really? That's
yeah.
Okay. Explain a little bit of that before we get into any discussion. What is that, and how does what exactly is? So you're like carving wood, or are you talking about like
Carpentry.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of carpentry, really. My dad was a carpenter, and I grew up kind of helping him in the construction business a lot. And I never really enjoyed it as a kid because there was always a deadline of like, you gotta get this done. Why are you going so slow?
Oh no.
And but now that I have it's on my own schedule and everything, that I actually really enjoy the opportunity to build something with my hands. And being the nerd that I am, I've spent way too much of my quarantine time completely immersed in Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, nice.
And I have done I've been building dice trays.
Whoa, cool.
Okay. That's
That is
awesome.
slick. That's artisan right there. You can get on Etsy, start selling that
Seriously,
stuff.
though.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. I'm going through my third my third version of the dice tray now, and I'm pretty happy with how it's going so far. But no, I am also getting into carving as well. My wife has done some carving and stuff in her life, and she's gonna kind of help me out. We're gonna get some kind of cool designs in there on the box, and then embroider it and put the Dungeons and Dragons logo on the top of it. And everything.
That is baller. That's pretty awesome. So is that just something you decided off just out of nowhere? Like, I think I'm gonna find a hobby that requires my hands to be busy. I'll just do something during quarantine to just...
Yeah, pretty much. I had a lot of coworkers, a lot of people I know that were definitely hitting that kind of quarantine depression and everything like that.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I tried to make it so I could combat that for myself was always giving myself some kind of project and something different, something that really challenged me.
That's good.
As well. So, I of course did my normal stuff where I had a deadline for writing some video game music and getting some of that set up, which of course I did that as well. I created my own short one-off Lord of the Rings inspired Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Oh, slick. Nice.
Which was really fun. And then...
Are you doing this over, stream? Are you guys getting on Discord and then... nice.
Yeah, I've been using things like Roll20, D&D Beyond, and Zoom and other entities as well. It's been a kind of a multiple things needed to kind of recreate that as best we can in perfect experience.
Right.
But it's been really enjoyable. Really enjoyed doing that. And then I decided, you know what, I want to do something outside so I can be outside. And I want something that's going to take a long time to do and take some patience. And
right. I like how you talk about the kind of virtues you need out of the hobby rather than just the hobby itself. Like, I know I'm going to need this virtue of patience. I'm going to need discipline to do whatever hobby I'm going to choose. Okay, this one, woodworking.
Yeah. You start from there.
It's not a bad way. Yeah. Bad way of picking a hobby. I think it's identifying what you need first and then identifying what kind of things fit that need, right? That's not a bad way. It's
just a simple matter of spending hundreds of dollars on buying the stuff. Yeah,
maybe the less easy part to make decisions about, but yes, that's...
No, trust me, my wife was already in the beginning. She's like, you are not buying a saw table. just to use it for like 2 months and then give it up. So over the last 3 months, my list of projects has continued to grow. And my wife's like, well, you're doing such a good job. Why don't you build us a bookshelf? You're doing such a good job. Why don't you build
You're
this?
growing to the need. Eventually you'll get to the point where you can justify the need of something as powerful as that. But you've got to earn it. You've got to get to that. You've got to get to that quest. Yeah, exactly. You're on quest line D. You got to get. Then you can go to C and then B and then A. You know, you got to tackle those weaker quest lines.
A grind.
Yeah.
Quite literally with sandpaper.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Oh my gosh. Yes, that is true.
No, I did exhaust myself the other day. It was pretty ridiculous and shows how out of shape I am.
Well, how much time do you spend on these things?
Well, I was sanding the parts to the base of this thing, and I cut everything out, sanded everything down, then attached everything. And I was out there for about 7 hours, and I had sanded for like nonstop for about 5.5 hours, trying to get that perfectly smooth wood.
No bathroom breaks, no eating, just constant sanding.
No, I was like, after I was done with that, I was like, what time is it? Oh my god!
Yeah. No, it's like any other creative project, I'm sure. You guys are really into it.
Right.
I was very exhausted, hungry, and my arms ached that night when I went to bed.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. It doesn't complain until later when your body says like, okay, are you done? You done wasting away? And okay, now I can try rebuilding myself now that you're done for the night.
Yeah. How was
I'll
that
complain to you tomorrow.
Yeah. How was that restful Sunday, you idiot?
Yeah. To the end of the week, the calm and relaxing end of the week.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned in the beginning that you are a sound designer and a music composer. What kind of projects have you been involved in as a music composer or a sound designer?
Well, I've been a couple different projects every now and again, kind of taking my time, pacing and things on that. But over the last couple of years, worked on a VR game for the Google Cardboard.
Nice.
That was called Repair Bot, and that was a pretty fun like little arcade experience as well. We were definitely kind of going to this old school arcade feel for this virtual reality in which like the ship started falling apart constantly, and the sassy AI was not happy with the way that you were trying to fix it. And then I did some work on a game called Keyboard Commander.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Some mutual friends that we all know. Did a little bit of work on that for them, getting them switched over to a few things and updating some of their sounds and everything like that, and some of their soundtracks, and just kind of doing some polish work, more or less.
Okay, cool.
Some of that. And then I worked quite a bit with a gentleman named Robert Ackley.
Ooh, who we had on the other day.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So we're just running through the circles here.
Yeah,
they're all our old acquaintances.
But we've worked on a few games, and we've done a lot of game jams together because we seem to work pretty well side by side on doing a few things, and we have differing but the same philosophies of how to create a game. Oh, absolutely, and that's exactly.
I suppose
it's
that's
the games development where everybody attracts polar opposites of themselves.
And it is contradictory, and it's contradictory in the way that the discussions go down as well. But I guess we have the common goal, and we just have the different philosophies of achieving that goal, and then we can bounce that off of each other because we're very different personality types, Robert and I. But we really enjoy working together, and he's a good friend, and he's definitely someone I love be able to make games with for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah. Because you and I actually worked on one of the game jams together. A little game called Else Return Home, and that was sort of a like an atmospheric post-apocalyptic cityscape backdrop. I'm kind of curious from this perspective because I'm not a music person at all. What goes into making something like that? When you're having a discussion about what kind of mechanics we're going to have, what kind of mood we want to have, what goes through your head when we're in a jam setting, for example, and you're starting to develop thoughts about how you want to create music or sound design for for a project like that?
Yeah, well, game jams are definitely a different beast to tackle than necessarily what I would do for the process of doing a game where we have, a few months at least to work on something.
Right, like the design of something.
Right, exactly. But on the game jam, really what it comes down to is I love being there for the initial discussions and talking with people and getting trying to feel everybody's energy on how they're feeling for the
project.
The project. And I love getting those key story notes that we're trying to achieve, even if they're very small story notes. But even the smallest little thing can really indicate kind of how that, like you said, atmosphere and mood is really going to be set on things, and what do we really want to highlight about the world that we're creating. And as the composer in particular, when I'm thinking of the music of something, I want to make sure that I'm highlighting what the developers really want to showcase. Whether maybe it's not the obvious thing, maybe it is something else that they're really trying to get across. We had that post-apocalyptic world, which we definitely wanted to show, but the thing that we really wanted it to be about was this idea of finding home and finding where
right, because that was the theme
home.
Of the jam. Yeah,
exactly. And so I wanted to make sure that every time we were home, it was a very big contrast musically and thematically to what the outside world felt like. So that kind of gave me the idea of okay, I'm doing 2 tracks, one's going to be layering, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have this feel of security and hominess at the house, but still in this kind of cold world. But when you go in there, it feels like home. And so that kind of is how I did that for that particular one. And that's kind of how I always approach game jam pieces, is just that simple idea of I want to make sure the developers' ideas and what they really want to showcase is showcased in the music, because a lot of times we don't have time from the design aspect of games during the game jam to do those sort of things of hey, we're going to really flush out this story arc and really show this kind of thing. And so
you've only got
really
2 days.
You've only got 2 days.
A lot of that tends to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's if we can get any, music can create that world so much quicker and create a feeling so much quicker of what we're wanting to do. So that's what I kind of try and focus on.
And was that the same for Bridgemaster 2? When you guys were developing the soundscape for that?
Yeah, so Bridgemaster was the most recent game jam game that we've done, and we've kind of taken the reins of that game. We got a lot of really good
positive
feedback and positive reception as well from when we showed it off, that we're you know what, this is something that we want to kind of pursue and make something more of it. And Bridgemaster kicked my ass.
What? How so?
I was the first rendition of the music that I did for that game, I was up on Saturday. I was writing music all day Saturday, and we didn't go to bed until about 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
In the recording studio, trying
and the deadline
to get.
was on Sunday, right?
Yeah. And I still hadn't done Fmod, which is what we were using for implementing
sound
the audio.
integration.
Yeah, so none of the sound was actually in the game.
It was just in your hard drive. Yeah.
Yeah, and so 4:30 in the morning, we finally got everything in there. I got a rough mix and master of things, but I wasn't totally satisfied with what was going on. And it was one of those games that it really took me about 4 attempts, and on my 4th time I finally, and that's completely writing different songs, different styles.
Wow. Basically wrote 4
that.
songs.
Yeah, I mean, and it completely redefined everything every time I was doing it as well. It was different genres, it was different instrumentation, everything was completely different from it, and I've never really struggled that much with a soundtrack before. But
why do you think that was happening then, in that case, as opposed to many of the other instances where something came to you a lot quicker?
I think it's because the game itself is it's living in such a unique space of what it actually is when you kind of try and define what kind of game it is, because it is a puzzle game. And it is for it is for kids, but at the same time, it's also these ideas that we have of there is a bigger story going on through things, and there is a sense of danger on top of that. And we have this story that's going through the game, but it is a puzzle game at the end of the day, and normally puzzle games are very chill music, so that way you can focus on things.
You can just sit and listen to it while the game is kind of playing in the background. You can just think.
Right, exactly. But we wanted to make the game feel like you're moving forward, and you feel like you're constantly achieving something, and you are getting that sense of accomplishment. And it does we want to make you feel like you're constantly, just progressing through the game and progressing through this world and understanding more of the world through its puzzles.
I do remember I don't remember if this was the first version for the Version Master, the puzzle game we're talking about, but I do remember it was much more Lord of the Rings.
You're right, yeah.
Like very gung-ho adventure kind of style.
Right. Kind of fantasy.
Yeah, very
heavy fantasy kind of feel to it.
And it totally did fit in some ways, but then you're playing it as I have to think about these bridges, and I'm not sure why this music is so actiony. So I totally remember that you're
expecting Gollum to come up from the bridge, and you tell him you do not pass, and it's just all of this evocative atmosphere that feels maybe a little out of place, but also it's still epic in its own way.
Yeah, it was definitely too high energy, too battle tones, and it's because the original concept of the game was we were going to have a demon at the end of the game that you had to beat, but we definitely never got to that for the game jam, at least.
Yeah, only 2 days again. It's just hard to put that much content.
Yeah, there's just there's so much to focus on during game jams that you got to leave so much on the table. It feels so regrettable, but also great to see all of the work that you did get put in.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and so I ended up having to rework it a few times because we took it to a couple different showcases, and some of the consistent feedback we got was that the music just seemed too much for what was happening. And I completely agreed with
the intensity of it.
Yeah, the intensity. It just most people's comments was it's just too much. And this is something as a composer you run into all the time. People cannot
of every kind.
People cannot articulate what it is they want about music. Because it's so hard to articulate musical desires and needs. That you become kind of you have to, as a composer, you have to be good at reading people's energy and emotion on what they're trying to say to you about your thing, and be like, okay, well, is it this, and kind of be able to dig and use terminology that they can understand.
This reminds me of being at the doctor's office. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe the pain? And would you describe it as a prickling sensation, or is it like a sharp puncture? It's I don't know. My ears hurt. It's it's just too much.
Yeah, it's just too much. I'm like, oh, interesting. Especially this part right here, and it comes up, and I'm like, oh, I know what they're talking about. It's because the brass comes in, and the brass just feels too epic in this spot, and we usually associate the brass section with big action sequences.
Sure.
So it could be a small thing as far as literally take out the brass, reorchestrate it for something like woodwinds instead, and then you're suddenly there. But if you try to tell that to somebody who doesn't know anything about music, they're like, what? What do you mean brass?
Well, I mean, in general, the consumer is less concerned about the solution as much as they are about the problem. They'll just tell you what the problem is.
But man,
it's up to you to parse what the solution might be.
You remember we had struggled a little bit with Breakpoint on this too, even with our composer.
Oh yeah, no,
it's just hard
course.
to even not being a consumer. It's just maybe that'll work. I'm actually not sure.
I mean, any type of feedback you want to have, whether it be game design, gameplay feel, systems design, music notwithstanding, all of these things, you do have to parse all the feedback that people are giving you and understand what it is that they're. You kind of have to create a cache. This is how I do it, anyways. I generally create a cache of potential issues that people might run into, and then kind of think about what they may be what's the closest analog to why a person might be saying, why they're saying it, when they're saying it, and the context. Because like for me, it's kind of like what you were saying when you said the brass thing. Generally, people are like, you, at least in your case, you can identify the explicit time that people are talking about when they're saying like, oh, this is, you know, this at this moment when there's something weird that's going on. And in your case, you might be like, okay, well, the only real difference in between like a second ago and now is that the brass appeared. Like that's just, so likely that's the issue here. But if it's, have you ever run into a time when something was a little bit more nebulous and it was harder to track down, when somebody was saying, or at least more than somebody, but a few people were saying something about a track and you just couldn't identify what it was?
Yes, for sure. That's definitely happened before, and
how did you deal with something like that?
You know, I like to have a conversation with people about those kind of things. Like, okay, well, what are you feeling? What is it? What kind of reminds you of? What is it? What is it you're going? What are you thinking about when this happens and stuff like that? And you can kind of just do the whole thing. And that was actually one of the other problems with Bridgemaster, is it wasn't just the simple case of, oh, it's just the brass coming in here that's too intense. It was literally the entire track's energy was just way too high for what people were wanting to do. And I ended up doing a complete rewrite, which, you know, it happens in the game world.
As it happened like 4 times over with the Bridgemaster.
Yeah. And it literally took me through a month-long break from the music because I was getting frustrated with how it was turning out. I was like, there's no way this is not happening. Like, I can't get this right. And then suddenly coming back down and being like, you know what? Trust your gut, go with your original instinct, rework it from there, and do some research and go from there. And I ended up doing quite a bit of, basically, I did a lot of listening of classic pieces, classical music pieces.
Interesting.
And doing a lot of theory research onto why certain songs and certain phrasing worked the way it was in these things that we normally associate with magic. So there was a lot of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, Dance Macabre, the Firebird Suite, and a bunch of like really famous classical pieces that if you're kind of a symphony nerd, then you definitely know those, and I certainly am. I played most of those pieces before in the viola section, and so like I broke down a lot of what those were doing and trying to understand why was that working and why was it doing this and what do we associate with these things. And it's a similar process that I learned when I was in grad school for film music composition, where, you know, our teacher taught us this technique which he always called, you know, to write something sideways, which means you can listen to something and you can capture that sound, that quality, whether, because a lot of times in film music people might come to you and be like, hey, I want this to sound like this other movie. And they're like, okay, that's this composer. What is it about the composer, the core elements of what that person's doing, right, that I can then make into my own music and make a sound out
right, because you don't want to just emulate another person's musical style.
Right, yeah. And you know, the great Igor Stravinsky was famous on quoting, and this is a translated version of it, of course, that good composers borrow, great composers steal. And the idea isn't that you literally steal this person's musical phrase. Right, of course. It's that you can steal their inspiration and you can steal those elements, those building blocks of what it is that they're trying to say and do, and then you can put your voice into that.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like, you make it your own, like literally by because like that's what happens when you steal, right? It's yours now.
Right. This isn't me taking from you. I'm just making it mine. This is just mine now.
Yeah, and there's actually like formulas and stuff and legal things of like, oh, you can do this much and you can do this. But like, I'm not really concerned much about that. It's more of the fact that I wanted to really dig in and be like, I want this to feel like the moment you hear this music, you inertly, whether you can recognize why you feel that way or not, but you feel like you're in a world of magic immediately. And it didn't,
like whatever kind of atmosphere you want to evoke.
Right, and I didn't want it to be like Lord of the Rings magic, and I didn't want it to be like
You wanted Steven
Elder
Garcia
Scrolls
magic.
magic.
Yes.
Right. I wanted it to be a magical world that was light, that was fun, that was a little bit cheeky, and
right, yeah, in tone with the game's visual style and its kind of atmosphere that it's building, right?
Exactly. And there's no song that's out there. Like, I'm sure there is something for somebody that is already.
Sure. If you look hard enough, yeah.
If you look hard enough, but it's not like it still wouldn't fit exactly the game. And so that's why they hire people like us to come in there and get that sound for the game. And we're really excited because we've got the whole new sound in there now.
Nice.
We're getting ready for our 6th submission, the Seattle Indies Expo submission.
Nice. Yeah.
And with that whole new soundtrack in there.
I'm looking forward to seeing what's changed and all of the new things. So when you're making a track for something during a game jam, obviously that changes when you're done with the game jam submission, and now you're moving on to what is more freeform time, right? So you have more time to expand upon the sound and the vision of the game. What did you decide to change immediately once you guys decided to work longer on this project?
I wanted to make the music flow more organically.
Okay.
That was the biggest thing for me, is that the music needed to flow with the game. And both Robert and Andrew Hermes, the programmers on the game, and the designers of the game, spent so much time working out ways to make our game grow just naturally, instead of us being explicit upon do this, do that, and then you can do this. For the players, it was we wanted the players to be able to explore and figure out how to play the game in a natural way. And I felt like the music, the way the music was beforehand, did not share that organic factor. Okay. And so that was the first thing that I absolutely wanted to change immediately, was that it needed to feel and grow very well with the game as the game design and the game mechanics grew.
Gotcha. It's interesting. So do you feel like you've been able to accomplish that as you've spent more time on it?
Oh God, I hope so.
I guess you're gonna find out pretty soon now, because the 6th submission is now going to be under judge for the upcoming online 6. So that'll be pretty cool to be able to see the changes for that.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. And we love the more people that we can always have. I mean, Robert is a big proponent of having as many people play our game as possible during these early development stages. And he takes meticulous notes on all that stuff. And, he reviews those with us, and we talk about them. And we kind of discuss what we can do to answer some of them. And we understand that some things are just offhand comments and people just have different opinions. But if we can ever find any common threads and things, then it's like, okay, let's pull that thread and see what's really going on.
Yeah.
It is interesting just hearing about this, because normally, like, you playtest and then you ask people for feedback. And that's a normal part of game design. But also, it's interesting to hear this from a musician's perspective, because it's equally as valid just for the music,
right?
Even disregarding any game design comments they might have.
Essentially, I feel like any creative aspect of the game is going to feel the same. You're going to be wanting to apply the same kind of mentalities, really.
I guess it's funny because like, thinking about it from a programmer's perspective, we don't really think about this. But then again, like, shifting perspective slightly, I guess when you do playtest, you do look for bugs. So maybe that's the programmer's playtest feedback.
Yeah, and I mean, as you guys know, every composer does things differently, and they are different in the way that the styles that they like to be involved in things. And I definitely love getting my fingers into a game and really understanding the game at a really deep level. And for like Bridgemaster, like, not only am I in charge of all the audio, so the sound design as well as the music for the game, but I'm also in charge of the narrative design of the game.
Oh, gotcha.
So I like understanding those things and pulling those things and making them feed off one another in order to create that that full world of immersion that we're looking for on something like that.
Speaking of styles and tastes, what would you describe your style as if you had to? If you had to narrow it down.
And I always love this because you hear this from you.
It is such a damning thing to narrow yourself down into like, yep, all I am is this one genre.
Right.
But that's not.
And like,
That's not what I mean to do. I'm just sort of. Like,
no, I get you. And programmers like do this all the time. Where they, and I know you're not necessarily a programmer, Nick, but like, programmers love to ask me this question all the time, especially like developers, like game developers, like, okay, so what kind of genre do you normally do? And it's like, well, bro, I've been like trained to do all of it.
Lots of, yeah.
Like I understand how to do EDM beats, and I understand how to do all these things. It's music, and like I can do those things. And like I went to grad school to learn how to compose at a really advanced level, which not every game composer for sure ever does.
Right.
And you don't have to either. You know, I know
This is
plenty
a choice
of
you ended up making.
Yeah, exactly. I know plenty of composers that have little to none of formal training and everything like that, but they can still make a banger of a soundtrack.
Right.
For something.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's not to say that I'm being snooty when I say that. It's just like a little fact is like
It's just to put the context into why you made the decision.
I've spent tens of thousands of dollars in order to understand how to write and do every kind of genre and everything like that. But everybody always wants to know what your kind of forte is.
Perhaps a more graceful way to ask it
does versatility matter to you that much? Is that one of the reasons why you ended up picking wanting to learn sort of the academics behind it, or was it more like you just wanted to expand your breadth of knowledge behind music?
It's a little bit of both. My breadth of knowledge of music and how to understand music at a very intimate level is what really got me interested in going to grad school.
Gotcha.
And understanding composition at that level. I also, the other thing is that I do want to have that versatility. So if I have like developers come up to me, they're like, hey, we're doing this new game, but it's like, you know, it's kind of like sci-fi, so not really your thing. Like, bro, sci-fi thing.
Totally my thing.
But
I will jump all over this.
But like forte wise, you know, whatever I feel like, when I feel like I can really showcase all of my abilities is when it's a fully symphonic score. And that's where I feel most at home, is being able to take an ensemble of instruments that normally on stage would be probably somewhere around 100 people to maybe 150 people, and being able to use that, because I always feel deep down a symphony, though it is hundreds of years old now and everything like that, it's still the most diverse and capable group of musicians that you'll find anywhere. You know, a lot of those people, like in an orchestra and a symphony, you know, they're very highly trained musicians. You put anything in front of them and they're going to be able to play. Now, granted, that depends on what level of ensemble you're going with. Yeah. But you know, there's several of them out there that you put anything in front of them and they're going to be like, yeah, we can do sci-fi. Yeah, we can do fantasy. Yeah, we can do jazz. Yeah, we can do whatever it is. Because a symphony is at its base, anything that you put in there is works. I've played symphonic pieces with synthesizers, tracks, and everything like that. And like in performance live, I've done those kind of things. And then, of course, I integrate electronic stuff into my compositions for video games as well, because I mean, come on, it's video games.
Yeah, it's actually with that in mind, so why you could be involved in a lot of different types of projects, why games for you?
Well, I've always loved video games. Like,
good answer.
I have definitely always had a deep love affair with video games, and there's something about the freedom in video game music that really appeals to me. I've had a lot of buddies that went on and they're working in Hollywood now, and they're working on big movies and everything like that, and I talk to them, and you know, they really enjoy what they're doing, but you know, they definitely can voice their frustrations occasionally about things of, you know, oh, I had to do this, and I had to do it this way, and we had to do this, and the director wanted this, and it's like it can be a lot less open to what you want to do when it comes to a film, because the whole point of film music is to
serve the picture.
Yeah, exactly. You are secondary to what this is on the screen. Like whether you make or break it, which is obvious as well. Movies, I mean, like, you know, a crappy movie soundtrack can make something seem really bad that could be really brilliant, or it can make something that's really crappy look or feel really good for some reason, and we don't know why. And there's been, you know, thousands of dollars spent into researching why we feel those ways and why music is so commanding of our emotions and our perceptions. But yeah, there is a definite feeling of, in video games, there is a freedom of expression for a composer that you don't get in a lot of other forms of writing music.
Gotcha.
That is just so appealing, and I always just have loved the way video games music has made me feel. My favorite video game of all time is Spyro the Dragon, and I love Stuart Copeland's. Yeah, I love Stuart Copeland's music to it. It's so addictive, and it made a game which was, granted, it was a brilliant game for the time. Right. But the soundtrack just made it so much better. Like, it was so good, and I've always just loved that. I've always wanted to be a part of that expression and of that world, and that's what really
speak of a kind of whimsical fantasy world. It's got that kind of vibe to it also. It's got a bit of fantasy, a bit of like dragons, but it's kind of whimsical, kind of silly.
Yeah, don't think I didn't try it. Alas, I am no Stuart Copeland, but it didn't seem to work as well, because Copeland's music, Stuart Copeland's music is very percussive heavy, because he's a drummer.
Okay.
He was a drummer for the. Yeah, he was a drummer for the Police, the band The Police. Yeah. His beats in there are really, really cool and really interesting. It kind of has a 70s rock and roll vibe, but it's kind of like put in this fantasy world. Yeah, it's got a heavy groove to it, and it just didn't necessarily fit Bridgemaster, which wasn't necessarily grooving.
Yeah, I don't know that when I look at the Bridgemaster's art, for example, I'm not necessarily sure I associate the same type of visual motifs as I would with Spyro.
Right.
But yeah, that is an interesting analog to be able to talk about, like what would have or could have, to an untrained eye, have thought that it would perfectly fit, but in reality, to a more critical lens, is. And as in accordance to sort of how you have looked at it as well, why that might not work, just because it feels on the outset from a shallow perspective like it could. From closer inspection, it may not. I think from a composer's standpoint, when you're trying to make the music, you've, of course, same thing with the art and all that, all the creative aspects, you've got to look at all of the individual parts and see which actually fit, which parts won't, and where to draw your lines with your references. I mean, we did that with Breakpoint too. I mean, we're very obvious with our inspirations, but we're also we're clearly deviating in some ways, not only just to express our creative freedom, but also to indicate when our differences are actually functional. Like, we obviously, for example, we're a melee-based game, so our hits need to feel much more heavy. When you hit something with a ranged weapon, like a pew-pew laser kind of thing, it's okay that kind of just like an enemy just sort of gets destroyed. There aren't so many particles that are hitting away from the enemy. In our case, because of two reasons: hits matter, and two, many of the enemies actually withstand more than one hit. We need to make sure that players know when an enemy has been hit. So there's a lot of different things that deviate from even original Geometry Wars that we're not advertising at the top of the rooftops that, hey, look how different our game is in spite of our inspirations. It's sort of something that almost has to be seamless and sort of glide into the background, so that the player, they feel it, but it feels natural to be a part of the game. And I suspect it's probably the same with music, actually. You don't want people to be... You want people to be understanding the references you're making, but you don't want them to be drawing parallels as if like, oh, this is just basically like J.R.R. Tolkien's, you know, like world. This is totally what would have been in Peter Jackson's movie, you know, The Lord of the Rings or something like that. But you also want people to, you do want people to understand the analog to, oh, it's kind of a fantasy world. So understanding and drawing parallels between not only your comparisons and similarities, but to your differences is important, but also allowing it to seamlessly glide into the background is kind of something that is, for a lot of creative talents, is kind of the reality, I think. I think some people would think it's kind of an unfortunate reality that a lot of your work gets unnoticed in spite of how hard you end up working on it, but it's also nice just to understand, like, I'm sure you've had instances, and I know at least one instance that I remember you saying, especially for Else Return Home, when people were asking, who did your music, right? Because they were asking because they liked it. And I felt like for that reason, like they would ask who did the music for Else Return Home, because it's a pretty cool soundtrack, it's pretty cool score, and there's some cool stuff going on there that it felt like it was very well thought out and well designed and well done. So I'm pretty sure at least that made it feel like all the more worthwhile to be able to make the kind of creative decisions you made in order to make the tracks you made for Else Return Home, and then get that feedback that it's not just something that felt like it was gliding into the background. It was definitely something that stood out to people.
Yeah, and I mean, there's times for both, right? There's times where you want to blend in, and there's times where you stand out a little bit. And, you know, speaking of Else Return Home, you know, as many people as said they enjoyed the soundtrack, I'm pretty for sure most people were really enjoying the shader work done in that game, done by Nick.
It was Andrew Hung, and then just a lot of the environments and stuff like that for the background. So
yeah, the whole thing was like, it was that atmosphere and that stuff that you guys created for that.
It was a big package, an entire package kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and it was just like, it was great to see a world that, because we had you, Andrew, and
other Andrew,
and other Andrew. Another Andrew.
3 Andrews on our team.
It's okay. Last time we had 2 Joshes on our team as well, and they both had the same initials as well.
Wow.
First, middle, and last name. We're like, I don't even know
how to refer to you.
Oh, yeah. Middle name too?
Someone just come up with a nickname for one of them. That's why we call one of the Andrews Pizza.
That's right, yeah.
They come up with a nickname like that.
I mean, I'll tell you what, though, it is nice now that we only have one Andrew on the team where I can be like, Andrew, you know, and then they're like, yeah, we know who you're talking about now.
We know which Andrew you're talking about.
But yeah, I think there's always times for each individual aspect of things. What's important, what is important in this game, because I think we all have those experiences. We played a game that maybe mechanically doesn't feel too advanced, but maybe narrative-wise, it's something that really stuck with us, and we absolutely love that game. And then at the same time, we have games that like have no narrative whatsoever, but mechanically,
I think we're looking at one.
But mechanically, it just feels great. And I think I discussed that with you guys too when I played this game. Like, I love the feeling of this game, and I love the way that you've managed to get this visceral, primal.
Totally. It's savage.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to say about a game with shapes, but totally,
I totally agree.
True, yeah.
But yeah, and like, it just feels so good to hit things in this game, but it doesn't require the use of things like blood and gore, and you know, it wouldn't feel the same if this game was a dude with an axe just mowing people down. I wouldn't get the same feeling I do from this game, and like, that's what makes this feel good, and it makes it feel almost calming, which makes like it's weird, right? But like, there's no narrative. It doesn't have to have a narrative, and that's what's also the great thing about video games is there's all those variables are all interchangeable, and everything changes from moment to moment on what you're doing in a game, what game you're doing. And how that game progresses, that, you know, you have those moments of where you want something to stick out a lot, or you don't want something to stick out a lot, and you know, that's what's really important. I know, I mean, your composer on this one is Mac, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Mac is a brilliant composer, and I know for the Game Jam weekend, he was doing more than one project. And so
Yeah,
he didn't have
kudos. Yeah, seriously.
He didn't have enough time maybe to vote as much as he wanted to on the soundtrack to this one, and giving him that opportunity afterwards to really stretch his fingers and, you know, get into it on this. I mean,
Right.
it shows really well. Nothing to detract from the work he did on the weekend.
Right, of
But
course.
you know, you give him a little bit more time to really, you know, focus in on something like this, and you're going to get a much better product
Right.
out of a composer like him. And
Right.
you did. And like it sounds brilliant.
I'll make sure to
Yeah,
tell him
I
that.
know. Yeah, that absolutely, definitely. I do appreciate being able to point to our collaborators and being able to point to the absolutely great and stunning work that they've done, because it's awesome being able to work with very talented people, like, I mean, yourself included, Steven, but by way of like Seattle Indies, because, you know, otherwise I wouldn't have met a lot of the folks that I had met and gone to a lot of game jams I had gone to and worked with a lot of the folks that I had as a result of that, because back before then, before I was going to meetups like that, it was mostly a crapshoot between people I knew, right? It was just was somebody I knew
Ask your friends, like,
working
hey,
on,
wanna
yeah,
work on a
exactly.
game?
Do you want to do something over the weekend? Do you want to try something out? And there, a lot of times it's met with a lot of trepidation. You know, they're a little hesitant about committing their weekend to something that they're going to get stressed out about potentially, and you've really got to commit. You've really got to get around people that are going to be able to commit to some time like that, and maybe they're not necessarily friends, but they may become friends over time. And it's like there's a lot of the people, because I didn't know a lot of the people. I think that was actually the first time when I was working with you on Elsewhere Return Home. That was the first time I met Andrew Goodenough, actually. That was and we're friends now, and so it's like one of those things where after working with each other and understanding our mutual similarities and differences, we're able to just kind of like chill out and hang out and stuff like that, and be good friends. So it's one of those things where, as a developer, it's nice to be able to go to a game jam, you know, work hard on something, and then make friends afterwards, as opposed to make friends and then see if they're compatible enough with you to make a game on. Because in this case, I'm trying to put the game jam on a higher priority in this case. Like, I really want to see and test my skill and ability to work on something like this. So
I mean,
it's...
I've had similar experiences too, because I did not know Sarah Bellhumor at all before I worked with her.
Good Night, Rowan.
Good Night, Rowan, and like, man,
still really like that game.
That is
I don't know why.
Such a different experience. I had never had an opportunity to work with someone like Sarah, who is an absolute tank of an artist.
Doing all of the work for your guys' project, insane.
Yeah, she can do anything you put in front of her.
It looked ridiculously beautiful. It was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and she has such a vibe, an energy about her when you're there working with her as well, and she is so concerned about so many other things other than making games, that like she's a great person. And like I love working with Sarah, and like it's one of those unfortunate things where she's become so good at what she does, and people recognize that so much that I'll probably not get a chance to work with her like ever again, because now she's so involved on things.
In a lot of things.
She's the organizer of things now, so I don't actually get to have that chance of working with her again.
You better value what you had at once,
absolutely.
At the time.
Yeah, just to shout that out, she runs the Diversity Collective here in Seattle, for Seattle Indies, so if you're interested in that, definitely go check it out. She's a great host.
And it's always a fun time. Yeah, I've been to them a few times as well, and I've hosted a couple of her tables and everything there, and it's a great time of talking about and being able to get some things into your game that you may not have thought was important, or maybe the opportunity to work with people of differing backgrounds, different views, perspectives. Absolutely. And I really enjoy the people there that I talk to them. I
still have to say, hands down, probably my favorite track from you, Steven, is that game. Is the songs for those.
For Good Night, Rowan.
For Good Night, Rowan. Both the beginning. I like the crescendo into the end. I just really thought that I was like, oh, this is so perfect. This is so like. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with exactly what you're talking about, Steven. Right? It's this calming atmosphere. It has to do with the build up towards, you know, like you satisfying this kind of like weird, strange but calming sort of plant creature type thing, almost like a pet. And like you having to acquiesce to its needs in a kind of like almost like it's a child, and how the music kind of builds towards that climactic moment of like, oh, you find out what it needs and why it needs what it needs. And it's just kind of like even for just like a weekend game, it's like it produces a lot of like emotional response just from a very it's almost like an instinctive sense. Like when you hear those strings and you hear the kind of like build up of the music as it gets more full, it feels like really great to kind of listen to, and it's a culmination of your actions as you're giving this creature plant thing what it needs. And it's I just felt like when it got to the end, I was like, this is awesome. Like this feels really cool. I mean, obviously a lot of this has to do with the fact that this atmosphere is really warm and inviting. It's got this hearth. It's got this fireplace. It's flickering with warm light, and it's, you know, the music is no slouch in that category either. It's just probably one of my more like favorite, very encompassed experiences. That's what I like the most about it, is it's very well comfortable in its own shoes. It doesn't try to say it's bigger than it really is. It's just this small, short, succinct, beautiful, fun experience, just like a small package. It doesn't need to be this huge thing. It's just like, here's a 5-minute kind of just like warm little touchy-feely thing where it just feels good to just, you know, be in this atmosphere for a little bit. And then you just move on with your life. Like after that, it's fine. It's just like, it's totally cool to be in this little space and then be like, that was warm, that was nice.
Yeah, and that credit, for a lot of credit of that does go to Sarah as well, who sat down with us in the beginning of that, and she immediately was able to visualize this world and create this warm color palette that you kind of talked about. You know, like everything in that little space that you explore as you're trying to figure out what this plant is and what its desires are, is like, it's so tailored to that feel of being comforted and being like, you know, parental in a sense. And that's really the whole thing we were going for, is like, I thought when I was writing that music, like, I'm gonna write a lullaby for my daughter, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
And so I would just, that's exactly what I thought when I did all that. I was like, I'm writing a lullaby to my daughter, and this is the music that we're gonna use for the game. And it worked out really well. And yeah, we had that exact sense from the beginning of, we are making a singular instance of a feeling, and that's what we want. And it's not complicated mechanically, it's not anything like that, but we hope that you have some kind of emotion that's sparked within you that you can't quite explain. And that's, we were lucky enough to actually to pull that off. And it was a great, definitely one of my favorite game jam experiences I've had over the.
What was the theme for that? I'm trying to remember.
Unexpected results.
Oh, yeah.
It's the finale to that game, right?
while at the same time on the other end of the spectrum, we're making a horror Dead Space.
Yes. I remember I think we went right after you in that jam for the presentation, right? And then we opened with now for something completely different.
Yeah, probably the most hilarious disjoint between attitudes at a game jam I've ever seen. Like, the most calming atmosphere. I think the most horrible, like, dark atmosphere.
I think both of our teams have gone right after one another several times in the game jam presentation. Not on purpose. It's like, it's just someone walks up there and does it at the same time, and it's always fun to watch your guys' games because, like, you know, it's always such a contrast between our games and our experiences of what we're doing.
And we don't set out to make like evil, gritty, angry games, but we sort of just like
we just do. It just happens.
And the funniest thing about this is, and this is a little behind the scenes kind of thought, is that when we plan games, our games tend to be very gritty and dark. Like, when we did like the game plan for something more sinister or Animalia, it was like these really dark worlds.
Yeah, because Animalia was like post-apocalyptic, and then Something
And
More
then
Sinister
Something
was
More
like,
Sinister was just like psychological thriller kind of
Right.
thing going on in the background. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, completely like dark, and it was really funny that those were kind of ideas that are kind of brewing in the background of things. And your guys' games are way more lighthearted. But then when
Yeah.
we get sat down and we're doing like a pressure cook game session, like where we're creating a game, we come up with these really cutesy games that like have some kind of like heartwarming feeling, and you guys are like obliterating little triangles,
Yeah.
creating death cubes in space.
Right, just everything exploding, hitting hard as possible kind of thing. It's like, this isn't a game about death, but
So prepared.
a lot of things are dying.
Yeah.
right. This isn't a game about death, but we list your kills at the end of
You all
Right.
know.
And like I still remember when you guys showed me the horror game halfway through the jam, and it was such a cool atmosphere, and I loved it so much. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, that floating cube came out of nowhere, and it was the big
that was
reveal
before-
of the bad guy. And it
Yeah,
was
that was
so
before we put the
good.
model in, and it was just a cube.
It was so good because it was like, oh, this is really freaky. This is like good.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, this cube comes at you, and you're like, what the hell?
Not even.
Right, because I remember we had like the pixelation shader in, and we had like the some of the textures in for the hallway, and like the lights were dim,
Yeah.
and it just comes out of the darkness and starts chasing you.
And I was like, is the cube bad? Is the cube bad? You're like, the
Is
cube's
it? Is it
bad,
good?
the
Is it bad?
cube's
I don't even
bad.
know.
Well, it was so fun, and I love doing those experiences as well on game jams. But one thing that I think is probably one of the more interesting facts about all of this is Ed and I have never worked together on
yeah.
any kind of project
that's true.
whatsoever.
Yeah, we'll have to remedy
even,
that sometime.
Yeah, it's
even
so
though
weird.
you guys have been in each other's orbit, it has not actually come to fruition.
For years now. I think
know.
Ed was one of the first people I talked to at Seattle Indies, him and Robert. Like back when it was still at that other tower in the building up there.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
back at General Assembly probably.
Yeah, the General
Saturday
Assembly.
courses.
Yeah, and then like we've almost worked together so many times for things, and just like never has not happened yet. The
Yeah.
stars have not aligned.
When it does. When
When it does, it happens. Look out, everybody.
Exactly.
Don't-
Look out,
don't-
world.
Calm down.
Yeah, I know. Don't really want to be putting those kind of pressures on you.
Yeah, exactly. Oversell.
Well, as we're approaching the end of the hour, Steven, is there anything you kind of want to plug, or is there anything you want to kind of finish off with to say?
I mean, we're working on Bridgemaster. It's on
Yeah,
itch.io. If you guys want to check that out. It's just the Bridgemaster, all one word. It's a fun little experience. and
Including is the part of the Bridgemaster, or is that not?
No, I think it is the Bridgemaster.
Oh yeah. Okay, I know what you mean. Okay.
Yeah. The Bridgemaster, and it's all one word. Yeah, and we definitely value your guys' feedback if you guys go on there and kind of do those things. Like I said, our main developer, or at least our main program developer, he does a great job of listing out those things. And when we have meetings as a team, we try and figure out what's going on and everything like that. And definitely during these kind of times, make sure to support different groups. Like Seattle Indies is a great group to
Absolutely.
be a part of. They still do virtual hangout sessions every Saturday, and also every month they have a little social time as well together. And I've met a lot of friends, and I've met both of you,
Yeah.
stuff like that from them as well.
Yeah, there was a co-working meeting today, which I mean mostly just ended up being us just talking about various things, including Breath of the Wild. But it's just sort of like a development space if you're curious about learning new things or trying to get progress on your projects, your personal projects for game development. It's a perfect place to sort of drop by, get surrounded by a lot of other indie devs.
Yeah, absolutely great stuff. And then I look forward to hopefully being able to present our game at some showcase here soon, so you guys can take a listen to the soundtrack and
Awesome.
let me know if the fourth time is a charm.
Sounds good. Well, everybody, this has been Breakpoint. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are going to be off. thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow for our last live stream for the Summer Steam Game Festival. Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.